Welcome to Our Voices, Our Stories, where we are recording history of gay men living in Western North Carolina. I am pleased to welcome a friend, John, here tonight. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. I want to start off with, how did a guy from Delaware end up in Asheville, North Carolina?
I lived 20 years in New Jersey, and I'd had enough. So, actually, I was tired of that hustle and bustle, and I just knew I wanted to go somewhere where there was still a change of seasons. The only thing I don't really care for is humidity. It just has always wrecked my hair. I've always had a problem with it. So we kind of started looking just at different mountain areas, and actually, my sister made a suggestion. I've known of Asheville, but she actually suggested take a look at Waynesville. So we had come down to visit Brevard and Waynesville. We just took a couple days and looked around, and sight unseen, went back, decided we were going to do it. And 5 months later, we rented a place it turned out to be in Maggie Valley. We rented without seeing it, just off of Craigslist, and packed up, didn't know a soul, we arrived, and 2 weeks later, everything shut down.
Oh, no.
So very interesting.
COVID.
Yes, everything shut down. But I love it. I love it here. I think this is where I was always supposed to be headed south.
It's interesting. Your sister recommended this area. My sister recommended this
Mm-hmm.
area too. There must be something about it that they know that we
Right.
didn't
I don't know.
back then. I don't know.
I think because it's very artistic. It's I think she knew that would be for both of us. My husband as well.
So tell me about your husband. How long have y'all been married?
So actually, my husband and I met, we had our first date November 17th of the year 2000. I waited 23 years to marry him because I needed to be sure. I still sometimes will say to him, you should have come with a disclosure on that first date. I might have rethought. No, so we've been together. So it was 25 years, and we can get into it more. There's an age gap. He's 21 years older than I am.
Okay.
Has had a very different life than I did. He grew up in Newark and spent a lot of time in New York City, in California, whereas I had this very quiet, kind of did what I thought I was supposed to do, the expectation. And then I went to Jersey. I was working for Ann Taylor at the time, and they moved me to New Jersey, and we actually met at an AA meeting, and I can get the whole sobriety thing. But there he was one day, and he caught my eye, and in fact, on our first date, he said, "Is this a date?" Because he didn't date.
Oh, okay.
And he still tells me that I was late. I had trouble finding a parking space. So, we have, the relationship has evolved over the years.
Of course.
He's my best friend. Sometimes I want to just bop him on the head.
As you grow older, how is that age difference? Because I know there are a lot of couples out there that experience that same thing. You meet when you're a certain age, and you don't really look at that age difference as being necessarily so big, and then all of a sudden, you grow older yourself.
Right. No, I don't personally.
Okay. Okay.
No.
Point taken.
So, and when I met him, I remember I was 33 at the time, and he was 54, and I vividly remember thinking to myself, if nature takes its course, he's going to go first, and I'll be left alone. And I think that was always a huge fear of mine, was to be alone. And then I kind of thought about it. Well, wait a minute, wait, John, you got to stop for a minute, because we have today. That's all any of us have.
Exactly.
And I could be hit by a bus tomorrow, and how great will it be to say that I was loved and I loved in return? So, it has stayed with me a little bit, but I will say now, 25 years later, he just turned 80. And I'm 50, will be 59 in May. And it does scare me a little bit, because obviously we blinked our eyes, and it's 25 years is gone. But again, how grateful am I, that, he has helped me to grow, to see things about myself that maybe I wasn't seeing clearly. And vice versa. I think I've done the same. He says to me, "John, you're the best thing that ever happened to me." I mean, how wonderful is that? Yeah, how wonderful is that? So.
You bring up a good point. It's better to say "I loved,"
right,
than never being able to say that.
Right.
And
absolutely,
that message needs to be out there more and more and more. I think sometimes as gay men, we maybe put too many restrictions
Right.
on what that love looks like,
Right.
or there's barriers of age and things like that. And yeah, we all have our own time and our own wants and needs, but there's nothing greater than to be with somebody and to
Absolutely.
learn and grow.
And that's, and the relationship has evolved with time. We are, even to this day, I mean, I'm always, hey, baby, I love you, kiss, always, I'll
Right.
touch, it's just always been, and I've never been one who's afraid to express my feelings. I just have always been, but, always before, kiss goodnight, kiss in the morning, kiss, it's just, we're very, very affectionate with one another.
Good.
So.
Good. So I noticed when we spoken earlier and everything, you were talking about how you were a little bit more reserved in the past.
I was.
And where does that come from?
So, I mean, if I think about it, I was trying to think about my kind of my life, and if it breaks into pieces, there's some things that have happened over, like the first one would be up to age 7. And at that time I knew that I knew something was different. I thought the $6 million man was hubba hubba. It was a 70s thing. It was that chest hair, and I still, but I also knew I should keep secret. I don't talk about it. So there I was at 7 years old, and it became a pattern for me. I was a secret keeper for a long time, out of fear, out of shame, out of whatever. At 7, my father's job took us overseas. We went to London.
Okay.
We were supposed to be there for 2 years. We were there for 1 year, and then they sent us to Switzerland. We were there for 4 in Geneva.
Oh, wow.
And in that, so my parents were drinkers. They did get sober when I was in high school, but that 5-year period, the drinking really took off. My mother was miserable over there. And Dad, at the time it was always Mom was the alcoholic, but Dad was drink for drink, except that he stopped at some point and got up and functioned. So it was a crazy time. It was a wonderful time. We had lots, but it was really crazy. And that's where, for me, food became a huge issue. I began to comfort myself with food. So that brought in a whole lifetime of weight issues.
Right.
I've been up, I've been down, So, but, I don't remember, I remember being the kids and having friends and never having, but I came back in 1979 and I went into the 7th grade. I was overweight, I was effeminate, and I had a little bit of a British accent from the international school. And let me tell you something, those kids were vicious. They were so awful to me. And I had never really encountered that before. So my parents said I would do better in a private school for high school. And I always laugh and say, well, the only difference was they just had more money, the people that were mean to me, than I did. It was a very small school. But the bullying was a huge piece for me. And it definitely affected me a great deal.
I imagine that keeps you even more in the closet.
Yes.
As far as, I don't know who to trust. I don't
Right.
know who to talk to.
And I basically felt this was me. I was never going to be enough. I was never enough. I would never be good enough. And it plagued me for a long time, but it still gets a little. So, that has been my struggle all my life.
Right.
I thought I was stupid growing up. I thought I was, I talk too much. I'm too heavy. I'm all the things. I'm too effeminate. I'm all the things. I could never see myself in a positive light. And my family's very judgmental. Believe me, and I wish my parents are no longer here. And you know what? I never thought I wasn't loved. I always knew that I was loved, and they provided for me a home, an education, all that stuff. But yeah, judgmental, very judgmental. And so I was always concerned with what people would think of me, what was expected of me. And I was afraid. A great deal of fear in my life. And fear was a huge influence for me in every decision that I made. So, I just trying to think, when I graduated, I went to college, just kind of the norm. And it's funny, after I finished college, I laugh at these people today, and I think, God, you're making, $80,000. I made $14,000 a year after I finished college, my first job. Really? But I moved back home. And so then it was kind of like going back into, and I had dabbled with my, there was a thing that happened in my freshman year with my roommate, and like I said, I always knew I was different, but you just kind of don't say anything.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that happened during that time is right when puberty was the whole AIDS thing came, and it scared me to death.
Right.
You're dealing with all the puberty and all that stuff is happening, and now you're being told that if you have sex, you're going to die, kind of thing. So I didn't. I mean, I was like a nun, practically.
A nun with none.
Right, exactly.
It is interesting how when AIDS came about, that was the biggest fear of everything, and
Right.
I hear that a lot from younger people. I'm 65 now, and I am HIV positive and have been for almost 40 years
Right.
now.
Wow.
But it just amazes me, how that fear was so prevalent, but we didn't have anybody to talk to.
No.
I mean, and it was coming from New York and DC and LA and that kind of thing. It wasn't in the small towns that we lived in necessarily. Yeah.
Right. It was a mess. And so that there was another fear, yet one more to add to the pile. When I went to college, I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I wound up doing art history. Not the most marketable of majors, unless you're going to go on to teach or do restoration. So I then decided I had always loved fashion, and I went back to school. I took an associate's program, and I went into Philadelphia, and I was going back to school, and that was 1992, and the very I could still remember it was Staples of all things in Delaware. I had gone. There was a project. I needed some supplies, and the young man that was helping me, who was extremely attractive. I mean, one of those people that just doesn't have to work for looking so in this incredible body. So we were talking. I was like, "Well, I need this, and this is the project." He's like, "Oh, are there a lot of gay people there?" Why would you ask me? Anyway, so we began this friendship, and I started going out more than I had used. I met another gay person, but as much as I liked him, he kind of outed me a little bit. He forced me to. It was. I didn't want to do it, and he kind of like, you have to tell him. I mean, it was whatever. And of course, my sister was like, she'd begun to wonder the exercise magazines, that I would have. I'm going to exercise, meanwhile I'm like, have another chip, or the International Male Catalog. Ooh, that was good. Yeah. But, so I told my parents finally, I was 25, and I'll never forget. Dad was out cooking on the grill, and Mom was in the room. We had I guess in Florida you call it a lanai, but it was up. We were on a hill, so we overlooked the woods behind us, and it was all glass. And I said, "Well, Mom, because she knew I was upset about something." And so when I told her, I said, "Well, Mom, I think I'm gay." And her comment to me at that time, I remember, was, "Well, it's not what I would choose for you." And I said, "Well, it's not what I would choose either." And I really did feel that way. I didn't want to be gay. I used to pray to God, please, make me straight, make me thin, make me not be so effeminate, make me all the things. Right. And that is important later because of that whole relationship, being sober for a period of time, that whole higher power and God. And that was a huge struggle for me. Anyway, so that was her response. And my father came in from outside, and I said, "Dad, I was just telling Mom I think I'm gay." And he said to me, "Well, John, it can be a very promiscuous life. And I hope that you will find someone to spend your life with."
Wow.
And I'm thinking back, I think my father was bisexual. I have no doubt. I have no doubt, because actually we were out to dinner one time waiting for the table, and he went to the newsstand. I went to get him, and I walked in, and he was looking at a gay porn magazine. And I was furious. I thought, you made me this way. I was furious.
Oh, wow.
And then coming to terms with that. And that's all part of my process, is coming to terms with all that. Once I came out, I was going out a lot more, and I started drinking a lot more. So my parents had gotten sober when I was in high school, and it was just, I was so uncomfortable. I mean, I still had come out, but I was still that fat loser who was never going to be enough for anyone, or good enough, whatever. And I was very uncomfortable, so I began to drink a lot more.
It's an easy way to deal with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. But, and all the things, I will never do this. I'll never, I drove when I shouldn't have been driving. I remember one night, pulling into the driveway, And the next thing I knew, Dad was knocking on my window. The next morning I had passed out. What if I had left 5 minutes later? I mean, would I have passed out, driving? Would I, So, all the things. I couldn't be an alcoholic. I never lost a job. I never, whatever. So.
Right. You were a functioning alcoholic.
Right. There were some very embarrassing stories. I mean, even a year into sobriety, the work would still talk about the hayride when John, oh God, it was, it involved Jägermeister. I never touched the stuff after that.
Oh, I don't blame you.
Yeah.
Had my experience.
Yeah. So, just one night, Dad was out of town. He was still working at the time. I was out with Mom and a friend of hers from the program. And somehow we got to talking, and Mom made a comment about worrying about my drinking. And I said, well, I worry about it too. And I found myself in a meeting a couple of days later, not really knowing, just knowing that I had been drinking too much. So that kind of starts the next period for me. And that was really the time of a tremendous amount of growth. Because, of course, I still was all the things I thought I wanted to know, all the horrible things I thought about myself. And, anytime I had to, I had tried to have intimacy with anyone, it was terribly awkward. It was terribly uncomfortable. And it was followed with so much guilt and so much fear. Because even then, that's when AIDS was still, it's very different. It's
totally different now than it was back then.
So getting sober kind of was that transition point. And that's kind of what it helped me to become comfortable. Like I said to you, I told my mother, it's not what I would wish for myself. Right. I don't feel that way now. I don't. But it was a long process to get there.
How was it going into AA as a gay man? I mean, were there other gay people?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I stuck to the gay meetings initially. And in fact, my first meeting was 5 people. And I was so nervous, and it was a gay meeting, and they all shared something, and then they all looked at me, and I burst into tears.
Of course.
Because there was people used to say in Delaware that it's not a meeting unless a McAllister is crying. So, you know what?
McAllister is his last name.
Right, exactly. Sorry. But that's where, first of all, I met great people, and that was a huge piece for me. Wonderful people that, kind of carried me along until I could start to, and it took a while. In this time I'd made some changes. So I had been in banking, and I got out of that and went into retail and ultimately retail management, which plays into my whole thing of not being enough. It's a thankless job. I hate to say it.
Been there, done that, I guess.
And it just completely fed that I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. Because if you're doing really great, they just want more. And if you're not, regardless of the circumstances.
Exactly.
So I just lost my train of thought.
So we're going into retail.
Right.
We're realizing that's probably not what we want to be.
But it was years. And that's okay. And this was the other thing. So I finished school, and then the whole thing with my job at the bank, things began. I was a year sober, and I had been great for all my life, kind of stick my head in the sand, be an ostrich, and then when everything's the way it should be, I'll pop back out.
Right. Right.
But things began to get a little squirrely. You're starting to, the look. And so what I do is, I would make a huge change. I would change a career. I would just change a job. I would move, whatever. I'd make a huge change, and it would distract me, because I'd be starting to go a downward spiral. And that comes up. It's important later because meeting Jimmy prevented that. So I was, 19? I can't even think. I'm a year and a half sober. Anyway, I got this job. They asked me to move. I went to Reading, Pennsylvania with this job. And so I was now running my own store. That got uncomfortable. So I made a change. I went to a different location. That got uncomfortable. So I left that company, went to another one. I was always, basically what I was doing is I was running up against myself and my, as they call them, character defects, or the things that I was not ready to look at. And by making a change, it sort of reset. Everything reset, and I didn't, but
you didn't have to deal with dealing with myself.
Right. So that was a pattern for me from, up until I really met Jimmy. But I had some bouts with depression. I had seen some, and I think that's really important. I've now been informed, my aunt tells me that as a teenager, I talked about suicide. I was so unhappy because of the bullying. I don't remember it, but I would talk about wanting to die. I mean, it was really awful. And I don't know that I let my parents know. I mean, they knew I was struggling. I don't know. My mother says she didn't know how bad it was. I don't know. I don't remember that. It's funny. All my siblings, we all have different memories of growing up, of the way the interaction. Like David remembers some things that I don't remember, and you know, if I remember things, David, of course, says that didn't happen. Kind of.
Yeah. We have our selective memories.
Right. Exactly. So I met Jimmy, and I began to get into one of those things at work. You know, I had a great. I loved my job. I loved coming to New Jersey with Ann Taylor. I was helping them open their loft stores. They were brand new. I had a great district manager who moved me from Pennsylvania. She asked me to come with her to run her store. She went back to Ohio, where she's from, and then we had a little bit of a revolving door with, you know, and then I wound up getting a manager that we were like a district manager. We were oil and water. You know, I was very much the people side of things, and she was the numbers side of things. And we couldn't find a happy middle ground, you know, and Ann Taylor was great because they believed in relationships. And you talk, and I'm all about a relationship. I really believe in that whole people coming into our lives. It's a reason, a season, a lifetime. And so I got squirrely, and I one day was in Rehoboth Beach, and I saw my old district manager from way back when at my early days in Ann Taylor, and she said, "Hey, I'm working for Tommy Hilfiger. Come see me." So I did, and then my fix happened. I found a new job. It didn't last long. Unfortunately, they decided they weren't going to. It was a whole division of Tommy that they were going to. It didn't work. So I found myself unemployed. Well, on the brink of. And then there was another store in that shopping center that I had interviewed for another location. Anyway, that worked, so then I wound up there. So I made these changes, and again, something had happened where it just was a situation where I didn't speak up. And I didn't defend myself in the sense that, hey, okay, things aren't great, but let me just explain to you what happened over this weekend when we were here all night long, and my district manager and the visual person were just like a couple of girlfriends, and tore my store apart. And I'm a huge busy, but I didn't. And I remember the guy saying to me, if this was my store, this big cheese, I would be embarrassed. And it just crushed me. Wow. Because all my life I'd been embarrassed.
Yeah.
And ashamed. And that was the first time. So I couldn't run anymore because now Jimmy and I were together, and I went into a very dark place. You know, we made some adjustments to my medicine. It was, you know, again, there's repeated things every couple of years. So we'll just fast forward to the 2009, and I had it happen again. I was in a situation where, again, things that were out of my control, and instead of recognizing what was really good about what we were doing, it was all like the negative. And of course I took it on myself. It was my fault. And listen, I do see things, it takes two. And I know there were things I could have done differently in all my jobs. And that's part of, I think, life, is we get a chance to learn and look back on and say, well, gee, John, you could have. And I'll tell you, Jimmy was a big part of that, telling me, you know.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
So just like I've done the same for him in terms of the way he's handled certain things. So I wound up with shingles in my eye and on my face. It was very stressful.
Painful.
Yeah,
too.
Very painful. And they had given me something to help with the facial nerve pain. It was Neurontin, also used to treat bipolar 2. I'd been on it. I was feeling better. I cut it in half. I went back to work, and then I just stopped it. And 10 days later, I was back at the doctor. I remember my last day at work, I was just bawling my eyes on my DM was like, John, what is wrong? I could not. I just would. My life, I thought, if this is my life, I don't want it anymore. And I don't want to be here anymore. I mean, it was really bad. So I wound up back at the hospital. And this time with where you go behind where the doors close behind you when they lock, kind of thing.
Oh.
They didn't keep me, which I'm always, but, that started a period of 7, 8 years. I mean, it was, I was just a mess, but I also was trying to grow in that time. And that's where some huge issues where I began to take a look at and see things in my life and patterns in my life, and really address some of those things, that whole being not enough and being afraid all the time, and thinking this is what I'm supposed to do because this is what people expect of me.
Right.
Judging myself, judging others, because I was judging people too, because it was a defense mechanism for me.
Yep.
And that's when I began to see those things and work to try and change them.
I think it is so common amongst our gay community in our early years that we do feel we're so scared to come out or to talk because, one, we didn't have people to talk to, but also because we're just scared to even voice what we're thinking because society has put that upon us and everything. And even while things are different now, there's still a great, huge population that goes through those same experiences. I'm not enough. I'm never going to be enough. You know, I hear that from people who are bodybuilders and everything like that, but they still struggle.
And you look at them, you think, what kind of, you know?
But then again, we don't know what's going on inside of their mind.
That's exactly
and
right.
we have not let people to know what's going on in our hearts.
And people have always known. I mean, people could tell I'm gay. I mean, I had one person who was like, I wasn't sure. Excuse me, were you smoking some crack? Because how did you not know? And the whole thing of that, you know, my voice gives it away. I mean, I sound, my mother's voice was a little bit lower, mine's a little bit higher. When I lived at home, her friends would call me like, Wally? No, it's John kind of thing. So I've always, and people call me Miss on the phone, and I'm just like, listen, I'm going to stop you right now.
Right.
We'll clarify this.
Good.
But yeah, all that stuff. So, you know, this is basically learning to be okay with who I am. And I'm not saying it's perfect because I still have days that, you know, that little voice comes up and says, look at that big fat loser in the mirror. You know, and it's.
I don't think you'd be human if you didn't still have days. I mean, these are things that we were taught as children or learned or whatever. And it's hard. You don't just snap and be done with all that.
And so much of us is judged on based on what I mean, let's face it, how we look, you know, all that stuff. I would say, you know, the whole top bottom. As a bottoms, you shake a tree and 1,000 of us fall out. And there's always someone younger and prettier than me. You know, and it's always been for me like, why couldn't I have been like that?
Yeah.
You know, why do I have to be this kind of thing? Or focusing on a room of 100 people and one person doesn't like me. Well, that's all I can focus on.
That's all.
What did I do? What is wrong with me?
So do you think that being in recovery really helped to bring you out of that shell and let you start to accept, I'm okay just as I am?
Yes, but it was a very rocky, it was a very hard journey. And it did take that basically, that really dark period in my life. And there was a guy who remembers, here we grow again, when you say, and I think it's so true.
It is so
the
true.
most painful things can generate the most tremendous amount of growth.
Amen.
But it doesn't happen overnight. And you kind of have to hang in there. And I kind of checked out for a while. And I think that's what I needed to do. And to lick my wounds and to try and address. And that was when I started to address the whole thing of, you know, looking at the world around me and what, you know, the whole spirituality thing and all of that. And taking chances. I mean, that was a big part for me, was learning to take chances. One thing I loved about being, and I don't, as I said, I don't go to meetings anymore. And I do drink occasionally because I discovered that, you know, part of kind of getting out there and doing more and making friends. And I thought, I don't really think about it. And I discovered that, I can go to something and have a drink or two, and then it'll be weeks and and I don't obsess about it during, and that's the thing.
Right.
I think at the time I thought that because I was just so uncomfortable. But it has brought me the person that I was 10 years ago. What are we now? 2026? Yeah, we'll say 10, somewhere between 10 and 15 years ago, closer to 10, is so different from the person that you have today. My friends used to call me 50s girl, clutching my pearls. I was such a prude. I mean, I was so prudish. I was so afraid. And I would listen to their stories about going to these wonderful, like, leather events. And I'd be like, wow, that's fascinating. Like, wanting to be, standing on the outside and being like, I wish I could be a part of that. But being afraid, being very afraid. And again, part of that is coming from the family I came from. And always, it's just a very different. And I've worked very hard to change my thinking and my, and how I view myself, how I view others, that sort of thing. And, as I said, I always knew I was loved. And my mother died in 2024. And I went and got 7 tattoos.
So let's take a break here, and when we come back, let's talk about why the need to get 7 tattoos, and then about the whole bear weekend that you just experienced. Okay, so we'll be right back